Graham,
Hey, Ian, hello again.
hello again. And this part of the show, Graham, what I like to do, I call it Success Secrets, where I sort of try and delve into our guests' minds a little bit and find out some of their success secrets. However, today, I believe you would like to do it slightly differently, and you're going to tell us a success story?
Well, Ian, I know that you like to think big, so
Think,
I,
yeah.
I thought, let's take one of the greatest, possibly the greatest success story in human history, the Apollo space program.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I love Apollo, and I love everything about Apollo, you know. So,
yeah,
I'm,
and just imagine, what happened there with 1960s technology. We sent men to the moon with 1960s technology. In 2012, there were two Google engineers who calculated that a single search on Google.com uses as much computing power as was available to the entire Apollo program. That's including the computers on the spacecraft and the computers on the
mm.
ground at mission control.
Yeah, I mean, I find that incredible. I read something similar that in one of these there's more power than on the Apollo spaceship.
Exactly right.
How do we do it? I mean, I just don't know how we managed to get a man on the moon in those days. Yeah, it's incredible. But we had
It,
some. It
it
wasn't all
really
plain
is. I mean,
sailing,
it,
was
it
it?
really is one of the great.
Yeah, I mean, and those guys. I mean, to me, they are heroes because they were those test pilots. They were just test pilots, weren't they? They went into the NASA the first was it first Mercury 9 and the second Mercury 9. They were test pilots, and they would. I mean, a lot of them, not a lot. Some of them died. They were heroes because they were pushing the boundaries into the unknown, weren't they?
Absolutely, absolutely, and well, when we think of Apollo, we tend to think of Apollo 11 and one giant leap for mankind. We also think of Apollo 13 and
Tom
okay,
Hanks.
Houston, we've had a problem here.
Yes.
Uh, but one of the great Apollo stories is the first 2 minutes of the Apollo 12 mission. Um, now,
Right.
Apollo
I don't actually know this Apollo 12 mission.
this
Yeah.
is Apollo 12. This is obviously the flight that came after Apollo 11.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah. I don't know this story.
okay, well, Apollo 12 launches in the middle of a rainstorm,
Hmm.
and 36 seconds after liftoff, the spacecraft is hit by lightning. 16 seconds after that, it gets hit again by lightning. Now, on board the spacecraft, all of the main electronics disappear. The main electrical power goes out. Pete Conrad, who is the mission commander, says, "We just lost the platform, gang. I don't know what happened." But back on Earth, things are not much better. All of the data on all of the screens at Mission Control in Houston, it just turned into this crazy pattern that makes no sense at all. And it looks obvious that the mission is going to have to be aborted. And in the spacecraft, Pete Conrad has got his hand on the abort lever, and he's all ready to jettison the command module to safety. But back at Mission Control, there is a 24-year-old engineer called John Aaron.
Right.
And as he looks at this strange pattern of data on the screen, he realizes that he's seen the same pattern before. In fact, he saw it 1 year previously during a test. And he became curious about it, and he decided to investigate and to find out more. And he discovered that it was all connected to a small, obscure circuit called the signal conditioning electronics.
Right.
So now, with Apollo 12 seconds away from being aborted, he says to the flight controller, he says, "Try SCE to AUX."
Right.
Now, the flight controller has never heard of this, says, say again, SCE to off. And John Aaron says, no, SCE to aux, meaning auxiliary.
Yes.
So the flight controller tells Capcom, who's talking to the astronauts on the spacecraft, he tells Capcom to pass on the message. So Capcom says to the astronauts, try SCE to auxiliary. Now, on board the spacecraft, Pete Conrad has never heard of this thing before either.
And he's the commander.
He says, FCE. Right, the mission commander, yeah. He says, FCE to auxiliary? What the hell's that? And Capcom says, SCE to auxiliary. Well, eventually the astronauts, they locate the switch and they flip it, and poof, the problem goes away. The power comes back, the mission control, the screens return to normal. The mission has been saved, and it's been saved by one man at mission control. And I think, Ian, I think there are three lessons, three success secrets we can draw from this. I think the first one is to never miss an opportunity to learn.
Right.
The year before, when John Aaron had seen this strange pattern, he wanted to know more. He wanted to find out what was going on. He wanted to understand it. And successful people never miss an opportunity to learn.
Right.
I think the second lesson we can get from this is how important it is to make those connections between things. When John Aaron saw the same pattern 1 year later, he was able to link it to what he'd seen before and what he'd learned before. And so much about being successful, and so much about achieving things, and so much about being creative is about having the ability to make connections between different things.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think the third lesson we can draw from it is that this is obviously a great story of the power of teams, and it really does underline how critical it is to make sure that everybody in the team has a voice, and everybody can use that voice, and everybody has a chance to be listened to. Successful teams, they really understand that it is never the case that everybody knows everything.
Mm. Yeah.
And
sorry, carry on.
actually, no. I think I said there was three success secrets.
Yes.
We can learn from this. Actually, I do think there is a fourth success secret we can take from Apollo 12 as well. And that is the importance of actually celebrating success. One of the great things when you listen to the recordings from Apollo 12, after this great drama of the first 2 minutes, the astronauts, they're just laughing and whooping all the way into space. Pete Conrad says, "Hey, that was one of the better simulations, believe me. Phew, man alive." And I really think that's the final success secret here. It's
Celebrate your success. Yeah.
Celebrate success. Enjoy the ride, and quite simply, have fun.
Yeah. Yeah, the 4 great points, success story points. I love those. Yeah, and the whole Apollo project was about problem solving on the seat of your pants, wasn't it? As they were going along, a lot of the time.
Absolutely, yeah, and of course, there was so much work that went into those missions, so much preparation. So it's all about being able to use that learning, as you say, by the seat of your pants, being able to make the connections between the problems as they arise and the learning and all the hard work that you've done previously.
I think you see this in a lot of successful people. They are able to connect the dots. What they see in front of them, they're able to connect the dots, whereas many of us look at the same thing and we can't see it. Yeah, but they are able to do that.
Exactly right, exactly right. And often that's because they've done all the hard work previously to put themselves in that position where they can connect the dots and solve the problem.
Yes, and they are solving problems, you know. And again, you look at a lot of successful people in the world, and what they do, they think, is this a problem worth solving? Does it need solving? And usually, the most successful people are solving big problems in the world. So that's a great. And you know, I often wonder, like we're teachers, and I often wonder if the younger generation today could do what those guys did, because particularly in Asia, I don't want to get into this in too much detail, but problem solving is such an important part of learning and teamwork and anything that you do. And I often wonder if we if we teach it well enough in schools and education these days, you know, or if we spend too much time on just learning, testing them on memory and things like that. Because it's, you know, that was a perfect example of how important problem solving is. You know?
Well, I would agree with you to an extent, but I mean, I think actually if you look across the world, I mean, if you look at the various space programs around the world, I mean, if you look at at JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, I mean, they've had some tremendously exciting missions in recent times where they've had to solve a whole, you know, host of problems on the fly, you know, making things up as they go along. So I think that broadly speaking, I think successful people of whatever generation or wherever they are in the world, I think successful people have all got these qualities.
Yeah, great. Who's your favorite astronaut then?
Oh, well, that's a great question.
Who were the astronauts on Apollo 12? Conrad?
There was Conrad, and there was Alan Bean.
Al Bean, yeah.
Who went down to the lunar surface. I mean, everyone says that Pete Conrad was a fantastic guy and was just great fun and you know, joking around. And I think generally, if you ask the Apollo astronauts, you know, who was the most fun, I think generally they tend to say that Pete Conrad. You know, everybody did love him. So yeah, I'd probably go for Pete Conrad.
Right. Okay. I always feel sorry for. I love Jim Lovell, you know, but I always feel sorry for him because he's probably one of the most unlucky of the astronauts, because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, he was mission commander of Apollo 10, I think, was it? And they were primed to go very, very close to the moon's surface, but not actually land. And they didn't give them enough fuel. If they land, was that? God, carry on. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, no, you're thinking of Apollo 8. And actually, Apollo 8 was one of the most exciting Apollo missions, because this was the first mission to actually leave Earth orbit and travel to the moon. And they didn't land on the moon, they just orbited around it. But I mean, Apollo 8 chalked up some amazing firsts in human history. I mean, the first people to leave Earth orbit, the first people to be able to actually see the full sphere of the Earth as they went towards the moon, the first people to actually look on the far side of the moon with their own eyes. You know, in some ways, Apollo 8 was really the groundbreaking mission there. So I think Jim Lovell has had some tremendous. I mean, he's had a fantastic. He had a tremendous successes in his career.
I mean, and of course he was. Tom Hanks played him in Apollo 13. So
that's right. And of course, in the movie, Tom Hanks gets the line about Houston, we've had a problem. In fact, in real life, it was actually Jack Swigert who was the first to use that line. It was Jack Swigert.
Oh, really?
Who said, "Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here," and then later Jim Lovell repeats it.
Right. Yeah.
He says, "Yeah, Houston, we've had a problem." But anyway, so he got a bit of luck there. That in the movie he gets the coolest line, and what a great line it is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
By the way,
yeah.
I mean, if there was any chance that I could be that cool and that understated, you know, when an oxygen tank explodes halfway to the moon, I would be very happy.
I'm going to put you on a spot. I'm going to test you. Who was the last man ever to walk on the moon?
Oh, gosh, the last person to walk on the moon, that was Apollo 17. And what was his name again?
I'll give you a clue. GC.
Sorry?
I'll give you a clue. GC.
Gene.
Yes.
Yeah. What was his other name?
Gene.
Again? You know what?
Gene Cernan. Gene Cernan.
Gene Cernan. Yeah.
Because you always think, you know, like Neil Armstrong would be in the party saying, "I was the first man to walk on the moon," and Gene Cernan would be there saying, "Well, what's your claim to fame?" "Well, I was the last man to walk on the moon." It's just like, I always think being in a party, you know, and then somebody says that first or last. What does the next guy say? You know. What's your claim to fame? Well, perhaps I'll just pass on this one.
Well, that's...
Yeah. So, you know, it's
well, fingers crossed, he won't be the last man on the moon for much longer, and it would be.
Is there any plan to put a man back on the moon?
Well, the current thinking is that the next man on the moon at the moment is looking as if that person might be Chinese.
Oh, really?
And certainly the Chinese space program seems to be focused towards a manned moon mission at some stage. So the next man in the moon might be Chinese.
Interesting. Yeah. Good. Well, look, Graham, I mean, today has been an interesting success stories episode for me, because we've never done this before. And actually, I've got a lot of requests for you to come back on the show, because you're a popular guest on TOKYOREAL. So please come back on sometime, and let's have a chat about something else in the near future.
Well, that would be excellent. I would really love to do that. Ian.
Okay. And those 4 messages, success story messages, fit in wonderfully with what we're trying to achieve here. So thank you for the story.
That's wonderful. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, and I'll leave it there. You have a nice day and keep in touch.
Excellent, and we'll see you soon, Ian.
Yep. Okay, Graham. Thanks very much.
Great.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye bye now.